The Battle of Manila Bay, a turning point in naval history. The Battle of Manila Bay, fought on May 1, 1898, marked a decisive moment in the Spanish-American War and reshaped the geopolitical landscape of the late 19th century. This naval engagement, also known as the Battle of Cavite, pitted the United States Navy, under the command of Commodore George Dewey, against the Spanish fleet led by Admiral Patricio Montojo y Pazarin. The battle took place in Manila Bay, Philippines, and resulted in a resounding victory for the United States, effectively ending Spanish naval power in the Pacific and paving the way for American influence in Asia. Background: the road to war. The late 19th century was a period of imperial expansion and rising tensions among global powers. The United States, emerging as a growing industrial and military force, sought to assert itself on the world stage. Meanwhile, Spain, once a dominant colonial empire, was in decline, struggling to maintain control over its remaining territories, including Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. The Spanish-American War was sparked by a combination of factors, including the Cuban struggle for independence, the explosion of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor, and sensationalist journalism, known as yellow journalism, that fueled public outrage in the United States. President William McKinley ultimately asked Congress for a declaration of war against Spain in April 1898. The Philippines, a Spanish colony since the 16th century, became a strategic target for the United States. Control of the archipelago would provide a foothold in Asia and access to lucrative trade routes. Commodore George Dewey, commander of the U.S. Asiatic Squadron, was tasked with neutralizing the Spanish fleet in Manila Bay. The opposing forces. The United States Navy. Commodore George Dewey, a seasoned naval officer, Dewey was known for his calm demeanor and strategic acumen. Asiatic Squadron. Dewey's fleet consisted of 9 modern warships, including the flagship USS Olympia, as well as cruisers, gunboats, and support vessels. The squadron was well equipped with advanced weaponry and trained crews. The Spanish Navy. Admiral Patricio Montojo y Pazarin, a veteran officer, Montojo faced significant challenges, including outdated ships, insufficient ammunition, and poorly trained crews. Spanish fleet. Montojo's fleet included 7 vessels, many of which were antiquated and ill-prepared for modern naval warfare. The Spanish also relied on shore batteries and coastal defenses. The battle, May 1, 1898. At dawn on May 1, 1898, Dewey's fleet entered Manila Bay under cover of darkness. The Spanish were caught off guard, and the battle began shortly after 5 a.m. Dewey famously ordered his flagship's captain, Charles Gridley, to fire when ready, signaling the start of the engagement. Key moments of the battle. Initial engagement. The U.S. fleet opened fire on the Spanish ships and shore batteries. Dewey's ships maintained a tight formation, allowing them to concentrate their firepower effectively. Spanish resistance. Despite their disadvantages, the Spanish fought valiantly. However, their outdated ships and inferior firepower proved no match for the U.S. Navy. Tactical maneuvering. Dewey's fleet executed a series of precise maneuvers, circling the Spanish forces and delivering devastating broadsides. Destruction of the Spanish fleet. By midday, the Spanish fleet was in ruins. All of Montojo's ships were either sunk or severely damaged, while the U.S. fleet suffered minimal casualties. Aftermath and significance. The Battle of Manila Bay was a lopsided victory for the United States. The Spanish fleet was utterly destroyed, with over 160 Spanish sailors killed and hundreds more wounded. In contrast, the U.S. suffered only a handful of casualties, and none of its ships were lost. Strategic implications. End of Spanish naval power. The battle marked the end of Spain's naval dominance in the Pacific and signaled the decline of its colonial empire. G.S. emergence as a global power. The victory established the United States as a major naval power and set the stage for its expansion into the Pacific and Asia. Philippine-American War. The U.S. occupation of the Philippines led to a protracted conflict with Filipino revolutionaries, who had initially supported Dewey in hopes of gaining independence. Legacy. The Battle of Manila Bay is remembered as one of the most decisive naval victories in history. Commodore Dewey became a national hero, and the battle cemented the importance of naval power in modern warfare. The engagement also highlighted the need for technological innovation and strategic planning in military operations. The Battle of Manila Bay was a watershed moment in the history of naval warfare and international relations. It demonstrated the growing influence of the United States on the global stage and marked the beginning of a new era in American foreign policy. The legacy of the battle continues to resonate, serving as a reminder of the transformative power of decisive leadership, technological superiority, and strategic vision. The key strategic decisions made by Dewey during the Battle of Manila Bay. The Battle of Manila Bay, fought on May 1, 1898, was a pivotal engagement in the Spanish-American War. It marked the first major battle of the conflict and resulted in a decisive victory for the United States Navy under the command of Commodore George Dewey. The battle not only demonstrated the growing naval power of the United States but also had far-reaching implications for the geopolitical landscape of the Pacific. This article delves into the key strategic decisions made by Dewey that led to his triumph at Manila Bay, examining the planning, execution, and aftermath of the battle. Background: the Spanish-American War and the Pacific Theater. The road to war. The Spanish-American War was a conflict between Spain and the United States that arose from the Cuban War of Independence. The U.S. had long been sympathetic to the Cuban cause, and the explosion of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor on February 15, 1898, served as the catalyst for war. The U.S. declared war on Spain on April 25, 1898, with the aim of liberating Cuba from Spanish rule. However, the war was not confined to the Caribbean. The Pacific Theater, particularly the Philippines, was also a significant battleground. The Philippines, a Spanish colony since the 16th century, was seen as a strategic location for the U.S. to project its power in the Pacific and gain a foothold in Asia. The strategic importance of the Philippines. The Philippines held immense strategic value for both Spain and the United States. For Spain, it was a vital link in its global empire, connecting its colonies in the Americas with those in Asia. For the U.S., control of the Philippines would provide a base for trade and military operations in the region, as well as a stepping stone to China and other Asian markets. Recognizing the importance of the Philippines, the U.S. Navy developed a plan to strike at the heart of Spanish power in the Pacific. The plan called for a swift and decisive attack on the Spanish fleet stationed in Manila Bay, with the aim of neutralizing Spanish naval power and establishing U.S. dominance in the region. Commodore George Dewey, the man behind the plan. Early career and preparation. George Dewey was born on December 26, 1837, in Montpelier, Vermont. He graduated from the United States Naval Academy in 1858 and served with distinction during the Civil War. By the time of the Spanish-American War, Dewey had risen to the rank of Commodore and was given command of the Asiatic Squadron. Based in Hong Kong, Dewey was known for his meticulous preparation and attention to detail. In the months leading up to the war, he focused on training his crew, maintaining his ships, and gathering intelligence on Spanish forces in the Philippines. Dewey understood that the success of the mission would depend on careful planning and execution. The Asiatic Squadron. Dewey's Asiatic Squadron consisted of 9 ships: the cruisers USS Olympia, flagship USS Baltimore, USS Raleigh, and USS Boston, the gunboats USS Concord and USS Petrel, the revenue cutter USS McCulloch, and the colliers USS Nanshan and USS Zafiro. While the squadron was not the largest or most modern in the U.S. Navy, it was well prepared and well led. Dewey's ships were equipped with the latest naval technology, including steam engines, rifled guns, and armor plating. The crews were highly trained, and Dewey had instilled in them a sense of discipline and purpose. The squadron was ready for action when the order to attack Manila Bay was given. The strategic decisions. Planning the attack. Decision 1. The timing of the attack. One of Dewey's most critical decisions was the timing of the attack on Manila Bay. The U.S. declared war on Spain on April 25, 1898, and Dewey received orders to proceed to the Philippines on April 27. However, Dewey did not immediately set sail for Manila Bay. Instead, he spent several days preparing his ships and gathering intelligence. Dewey's decision to delay the attack was strategic. He wanted to ensure that his ships were fully prepared for battle and that he had the most up-to-date information on Spanish defenses. Dewey also knew that the element of surprise would be crucial to the success of the mission. By waiting a few days, he could catch the Spanish off guard and maximize the impact of his attack. Decision 2. The route to Manila Bay. Another key decision made by Dewey was the route he would take to Manila Bay. The bay is located on the western side of the island of Luzon, and there are several approaches to the bay, each with its own challenges. Dewey chose to approach Manila Bay from the south, through the Boca Grande, Great Mouth, Channel. This route was longer and more exposed than other options, but it offered several advantages. First, it allowed Dewey to avoid the heavily fortified islands of Corregidor and Caballo, which guarded the northern entrance to the bay. Second, it gave Dewey the element of surprise, as the Spanish did not expect an attack from the south. Dewey's decision to take the southern route was a calculated risk. He knew that the Spanish would be expecting an attack from the north, and by choosing a less obvious route, he could catch them off guard. The decision paid off, as the Spanish were unprepared for Dewey's approach. Decision 3. The nighttime approach. Dewey's decision to approach Manila Bay under cover of darkness was another critical factor in the success of the mission. The Asiatic Squadron entered the bay on the night of April 30, 1898, under the cover of darkness. This decision was based on several considerations. First, a nighttime approach reduced the risk of detection by Spanish lookouts. The darkness provided cover for Dewey's ships, allowing them to enter the bay undetected. Second, a nighttime approach allowed Dewey to position his ships for a dawn attack, giving him the advantage of surprise and the ability to strike at first light. Dewey's decision to approach at night was a bold move, but it was based on careful planning and a thorough understanding of the tactical situation. The decision demonstrated Dewey's willingness to take calculated risks in pursuit of victory. Decision 4. The formation of the squadron. As Dewey's squadron entered Manila Bay, he made another key decision regarding the formation of his ships. Dewey ordered his ships to form a line ahead, with the USS Olympia in the lead, followed by the USS Baltimore, USS Raleigh, USS Petrel, and USS Concord. The revenue cutter USS McCulloch and the colliers USS Nanshan and USS Zafiro were positioned to the rear. This formation allowed Dewey to concentrate his firepower and maintain control over his ships during the battle. By leading the line, Dewey could direct the attack and respond quickly to any changes in the tactical situation. The formation also allowed the ships to support each other, with each ship covering the one ahead of it. Dewey's decision to adopt a line-ahead formation was based on his understanding of naval tactics and the strengths of his squadron. The formation maximized the effectiveness of his ship's guns and allowed for coordinated fire on the Spanish fleet. Decision 5. The target selection. Once inside Manila Bay, Dewey faced the critical decision of which targets to engage. The Spanish fleet, under the command of Admiral Patricio Montojo y Pazarin, was anchored near the Cavite Naval Station, south of Manila. The fleet consisted of 7 ships: the cruisers Reina Cristina, flagship, Castilla, Don Antonio de Ulloa, Don Juan de Austria, Isla de Cuba, Isla de Luzon, and the gunboat Marquez del Duero. Dewey's decision was to focus his attack on the Spanish flagship, the Reina Cristina, and the other larger ships in the fleet. By targeting the flagship, Dewey aimed to disrupt the Spanish command and control, causing confusion and disarray among the Spanish forces. The decision to focus on the larger ships also made tactical sense, as these ships posed the greatest threat to Dewey's squadron. Dewey's target selection was based on a clear understanding of the enemy's strengths and weaknesses. By concentrating his fire on the most significant threats, Dewey was able to neutralize the Spanish fleet quickly and efficiently. The battle, execution of the plan. The approach and entry into Manila Bay. On the night of April 30, 1898, Dewey's squadron approached Manila Bay under the cover of darkness. The ships moved slowly and quietly, with all lights extinguished to avoid detection. The Spanish had placed mines at the entrance to the bay, but Dewey's ships managed to navigate through them without incident. As the squadron entered the bay, Dewey ordered his ships to form a line ahead, with the USS Olympia in the lead. The ships maintained strict radio silence, and the crews were at their battle stations, ready for action. The dawn attack. At dawn on May 1, 1898, Dewey's squadron was in position to attack the Spanish fleet. The Spanish were caught off guard, and their ships were not fully prepared for battle. Dewey ordered his ships to open fire at a range of approximately 5,000 yards, targeting the Spanish flagship, the Reina Cristina, and the other larger ships in the fleet. The battle began at 5:41 a.m., with the USS Olympia firing the first shots. The Spanish fleet returned fire, but their gunnery was inaccurate and ineffective. Dewey's ships, on the other hand, were well-trained and disciplined, and their fire was precise and devastating. The destruction of the Spanish fleet. The battle quickly turned in favor of Dewey's squadron. The Reina Cristina was hit multiple times and soon caught fire, forcing Admiral Montojo to transfer his flag to another ship. The Castilla, another Spanish cruiser, was also heavily damaged and eventually sank. The other Spanish ships were either sunk or forced to retreat. By 7:35 a.m., the Spanish fleet was in disarray, and Dewey ordered a temporary ceasefire to assess the situation. After confirming that the Spanish fleet was no longer a threat, Dewey ordered his ships to resume firing, targeting the shore batteries and other Spanish defenses. The surrender of Manila with the Spanish fleet destroyed, Dewey turned his attention to the city of Manila. The Spanish Governor-General, Fermín Jardines, realized that further resistance was futile and began negotiations for surrender. On August 13, 1898, after a brief mock battle to save face, the Spanish surrendered Manila to Dewey's forces. The surrender of Manila marked the end of Spanish rule in the Philippines and the beginning of U.S. control over the archipelago. The victory at Manila Bay was a significant achievement for the United States and established Dewey as a national hero. The aftermath, strategic implications. The impact on the Spanish-American War. The victory at Manila Bay had a profound impact on the course of the Spanish-American War. The destruction of the Spanish fleet in the Philippines effectively ended Spanish naval power in the Pacific and paved the way for U.S. control of the region. The victory also boosted American morale and demonstrated the capabilities of the U.S. Navy on the world stage. The fall of Manila and the subsequent surrender of the Philippines marked the beginning of the end for the Spanish Empire. The U.S. quickly moved to consolidate its control over the Philippines, and the archipelago became a U.S. territory following the Treaty of Paris in 1898. The rise of the United States as a Pacific power. The Battle of Manila Bay marked the emergence of the United States as a major power in the Pacific. The victory demonstrated the ability of the U.S. Navy to project power across vast distances and established the U.S. as a dominant force in the region. The acquisition of the Philippines gave the U.S. a strategic foothold in Asia, allowing for increased trade and military presence in the region. The victory at Manila Bay also set the stage for future U.S. involvement in Asia, including the open-door policy in China and the eventual involvement in World War II. The legacy of Commodore George Dewey. Commodore George Dewey's leadership and strategic decisions during the Battle of Manila Bay cemented his place in American history. Dewey's meticulous planning, bold decision-making, and effective execution of the battle plan were key to the U.S. victory. Dewey's success at Manila Bay earned him widespread acclaim and recognition. He was promoted to the rank of admiral and became a national hero. Dewey's victory also had a lasting impact on U.S. naval strategy, emphasizing the importance of preparedness, intelligence, and decisive action in naval warfare. The Battle of Manila Bay was a turning point in the Spanish-American War and a defining moment in the history of the United States Navy. Commodore George Dewey's key strategic decisions, ranging from the timing and route of the attack to the formation of his squadron and target selection, were instrumental in securing a decisive victory. Dewey's success at Manila Bay demonstrated the importance of careful planning, bold decision-making, and effective execution in naval warfare. The victory not only established the United States as a major power in the Pacific but also set the stage for future U.S. involvement in Asia and beyond. The legacy of the Battle of Manila Bay and Commodore George Dewey's leadership continues to be remembered as a testament to the power of strategic thinking and the impact of decisive action in shaping the course of history. How the intelligence provided by Oscar F. Williams impacted the outcome of the battle in the annals of military history. The role of intelligence in shaping the outcomes of battles cannot be overstated. From ancient times to modern warfare, the ability to gather, analyze, and act on critical information has often been the difference between victory and defeat. One such example is the pivotal role played by Oscar F. Williams, whose intelligence work significantly influenced the outcome of a crucial battle. This article delves into the life of Oscar F. Williams, the nature of the intelligence he provided, and how it altered the course of the battle in question. The context of the battle. To understand the impact of Oscar F. Williams' intelligence, it is essential to first contextualize the battle in which he played a critical role. The battle took place during a period of heightened conflict, where opposing forces were locked in a struggle for strategic dominance. The stakes were high, with control over key territories, resources, or political outcomes hanging in the balance. The battle was characterized by intense fighting, with both sides employing advanced tactics and technologies for the time. However, what set this battle apart was the decisive role of intelligence. Unlike traditional confrontations where sheer force or numbers determined the outcome, this battle was won in the shadows, through the meticulous work of individuals like Oscar F. Williams. Who was Oscar F. Williams? Oscar F. Williams was a relatively obscure figure in the broader narrative of military history, but his contributions were anything but insignificant. Born into a modest family, Williams demonstrated an early aptitude for analysis and problem-solving. His keen intellect and attention to detail made him a natural fit for intelligence work, a field that was still in its infancy during his time. Williams' career in intelligence began when he was recruited by a fledgling agency tasked with gathering information on enemy movements, strategies, and capabilities. His ability to synthesize disparate pieces of information into actionable insights quickly earned him a reputation as one of the most reliable intelligence operatives of his era. The nature of the intelligence provided by Oscar F. Williams was multifaceted, encompassing a range of critical information that would prove invaluable to his side. Below are some key aspects of the intelligence he gathered and analyzed: enemy troop movements. Williams was able to infiltrate enemy lines and gather detailed information about their troop movements. This included the number of soldiers, their locations, and their intended routes. Such information allowed his side to anticipate and counter enemy maneuvers effectively. Supply lines and logistics. Understanding the enemy's supply lines was crucial in determining their ability to sustain prolonged combat. Williams provided detailed reports on the locations of supply depots, the condition of roads and railways, and the availability of essential resources like food, ammunition, and fuel. Strategic plans. Perhaps the most critical piece of intelligence Williams provided was insight into the enemy's strategic plans. Through a combination of intercepted communications and on-the-ground reconnaissance, he was able to uncover the enemy's objectives, timelines, and contingency plans. Moral and psychological insights. Williams also gathered information on the morale and psychological state of enemy troops. This included reports on desertions, internal conflicts, and the overall willingness of soldiers to fight. Such insights were invaluable in shaping psychological operations aimed at undermining enemy resolve. The impact on the battle. The intelligence provided by Oscar F. Williams had a profound impact on the outcome of the battle. Below are some of the key ways in which his work influenced the course of events. Strategic surprise. Armed with Williams' intelligence, his side was able to anticipate and counter enemy movements with precision. This element of surprise disrupted the enemy's plans and forced them into a defensive posture, giving Williams' side the upper hand. Resource allocation. Knowledge of the enemy's supply lines allowed Williams' side to target key logistical hubs, crippling the enemy's ability to sustain their forces. This strategic targeting of resources played a crucial role in weakening the enemy's combat effectiveness. Psychological warfare. The insights into enemy morale provided by Williams were used to launch psychological operations aimed at demoralizing enemy troops. Propaganda campaigns, targeted messaging, and other tactics were employed to sow discord and reduce the enemy's willingness to fight. Tactical adjustments. Williams' intelligence enabled his side to make real-time tactical adjustments on the battlefield. This flexibility allowed them to exploit weaknesses in the enemy's formations and capitalize on opportunities as they arose. The legacy of Oscar F. Williams. While Oscar F. Williams may not be a household name, his contributions to the field of military intelligence have left an indelible mark. His work demonstrated the critical importance of intelligence in modern warfare and set a precedent for future operatives. The battle in which he played a pivotal role serves as a testament to the power of information and the individuals who dedicate their lives to uncovering it. In the years following the battle, Williams' methods and insights were studied and emulated by intelligence agencies around the world. His legacy lives on in the countless operatives who continue to work in the shadows, shaping the outcomes of conflicts through their dedication and expertise. The story of Oscar F. Williams is a reminder that the outcomes of battles are often determined long before the first shot is fired. Through his meticulous intelligence work, Williams provided his side with the information needed to outmaneuver and outthink the enemy. His contributions not only influenced the outcome of a single battle but also underscored the enduring importance of intelligence in the art of war. While this article provides a detailed overview of Williams' impact, it is but a glimpse into a much larger narrative. The world of intelligence is one of secrecy and complexity, where the full extent of an individual's contributions may never be fully known. Yet, in the case of Oscar F. Williams, it is clear that his work made all the difference. The main challenges faced by the Spanish fleet in Manila Bay. A comprehensive analysis. The Spanish fleet in Manila Bay faced a myriad of challenges during its existence, particularly in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. These challenges were multifaceted, encompassing strategic, logistical, technological, and human factors. The Spanish-American War of 1898 marked a pivotal moment in the history of the Spanish fleet, culminating in the Battle of Manila Bay, where the Spanish forces were decisively defeated by the United States Navy. This article delves into the main challenges faced by the Spanish fleet in Manila Bay, exploring the historical context, the strategic environment, the logistical constraints, the technological limitations, and the human factors that contributed to the fleet's difficulties. Historical context. The Spanish Empire in the Pacific. The Spanish Empire had a long-standing presence in the Pacific, with the Philippines serving as a crucial outpost. Manila, the capital of the Philippines, was a vital hub for trade, particularly the Manila-Acapulco galleon trade, which connected Asia with the Americas. However, by the late 19th century, the Spanish Empire was in decline, and its hold on its overseas territories was weakening. The Philippines, in particular, was a focal point of resistance against Spanish rule, with various uprisings and movements for independence gaining momentum. The Spanish-American War. The Spanish-American War of 1898 was a conflict between Spain and the United States, primarily over the issue of Cuban independence. However, the war also extended to the Philippines, where the United States sought to challenge Spanish dominance in the Pacific. The Battle of Manila Bay, fought on May 1, 1898, was a decisive engagement in this conflict. The Spanish fleet, under the command of Admiral Patricio Montojo, was ill-prepared to face the modern and well-equipped U.S. Navy, led by Commodore George Dewey. Strategic challenges. Geographic isolation. One of the primary strategic challenges faced by the Spanish fleet in Manila Bay was the geographic isolation of the Philippines. The archipelago was far removed from Spain, making it difficult to reinforce and resupply the fleet. The long distance also meant that communication with the Spanish mainland was slow and unreliable, leading to delays in receiving orders and updates. Lack of strategic depth. Manila Bay, while a natural harbor, offered limited strategic depth for the Spanish fleet. The bay's geography made it difficult to defend against a determined naval assault. The Spanish fleet was essentially trapped in the bay, with limited options for maneuverability or retreat. This lack of strategic depth was a significant disadvantage in the face of a more mobile and aggressive enemy. Inadequate intelligence. The Spanish fleet suffered from a lack of accurate and timely intelligence regarding the movements and capabilities of the U.S. Navy. This lack of information hindered the Spanish commanders' ability to make informed decisions and develop effective strategies. The U.S. Navy, on the other hand, had better intelligence and was able to plan its operations with greater precision. Logistical challenges. Supply shortages. The Spanish fleet in Manila Bay faced severe supply shortages, particularly in terms of ammunition, fuel, and provisions. The long supply lines from Spain made it difficult to maintain a steady flow of resources to the fleet. Additionally, the Spanish colonial administration in the Philippines was inefficient and corrupt, further exacerbating the supply problems. Maintenance issues. The Spanish fleet's ships were often in poor condition due to a lack of maintenance. The tropical climate of the Philippines, with its high humidity and salt air, accelerated the deterioration of the ship's hulls and machinery. The Spanish Navy lacked the resources and infrastructure to conduct regular maintenance and repairs, leading to a decline in the operational readiness of the fleet. Limited infrastructure. Manila Bay lacked the necessary infrastructure to support a modern naval fleet. The port facilities were outdated and insufficient to handle the needs of the Spanish ships. There were no dry docks or repair facilities capable of servicing the larger vessels, and the lack of coaling stations made it difficult to refuel the ships. This limited infrastructure further compounded the logistical challenges faced by the Spanish fleet. Technological challenges. Outdated ships and armament. The Spanish fleet in Manila Bay was composed of outdated ships that were no match for the modern vessels of the U.S. Navy. The Spanish ships were slower, less maneuverable, and poorly armed compared to their American counterparts. The armament on the Spanish ships was also outdated, with many of the guns being obsolete and ineffective against the more advanced weaponry of the U.S. Navy. Lack of modern technology. The Spanish fleet lacked access to modern naval technology, such as advanced fire control systems, rangefinders, and communication equipment. This technological disparity put the Spanish fleet at a significant disadvantage in terms of accuracy, coordination, and situational awareness. The U.S. Navy, by contrast, was equipped with the latest technology, giving it a decisive edge in the battle. Inadequate training. The crews of the Spanish ships were often poorly trained and lacked experience in modern naval warfare. The Spanish Navy had not kept pace with the advancements in naval tactics and technology, and as a result, the crews were ill-prepared to face a well-trained and technologically superior enemy. The lack of training and experience further undermined the effectiveness of the Spanish fleet. Human factors. Leadership and command issues. The leadership and command structure of the Spanish fleet in Manila Bay was plagued by issues of incompetence, indecision, and lack of coordination. Admiral Patricio Montojo, the commander of the Spanish fleet, was criticized for his lack of aggressiveness and failure to take decisive action. The Spanish commanders were often at odds with each other, leading to a lack of unity and coherence in their strategies and tactics. Morale and discipline. The morale of the Spanish sailors was low, due to a combination of poor living conditions, lack of supplies, and the general sense of impending defeat. The discipline within the fleet was also lax, with instances of insubordination and desertion. The low morale and poor discipline further weakened the Spanish fleet's ability to mount an effective defense. Cultural and social factors. The Spanish fleet in Manila Bay was composed of a diverse group of sailors, including Spaniards, Filipinos, and other nationalities. This diversity, while potentially a strength, also led to cultural and social tensions within the fleet. The Spanish officers often looked down on their Filipino counterparts, leading to resentment and a lack of cohesion. These cultural and social factors further undermined the effectiveness of the Spanish fleet. The Battle of Manila Bay. The U.S. Navy's approach. The U.S. Navy, under the command of Commodore George Dewey, approached Manila Bay with a well-planned and executed strategy. Dewey's fleet was composed of modern, well-armed ships, and his crews were well-trained and disciplined. The U.S. Navy had superior intelligence and was able to exploit the weaknesses of the Spanish fleet. The engagement. The Battle of Manila Bay began in the early hours of May 1, 1898. Dewey's fleet entered the bay and quickly engaged the Spanish ships. The Spanish fleet, despite being outgunned and outmaneuvered, attempted to put up a fight. However, the outdated ships and poor coordination of the Spanish fleet led to a swift and decisive defeat. Within hours, the Spanish fleet was decimated, with most of its ships either sunk or severely damaged. The aftermath. The defeat of the Spanish fleet in Manila Bay marked the end of Spanish naval power in the Pacific. The U.S. Navy's victory paved the way for the eventual American occupation of the Philippines. The Spanish fleet's defeat was a stark reminder of the challenges faced by a declining empire in the face of a rising power. The Spanish fleet in Manila Bay faced a multitude of challenges that ultimately led to its defeat in the Battle of Manila Bay. These challenges were rooted in the strategic, logistical, technological, and human factors that plagued the Spanish Navy. The geographic isolation of the Philippines, the lack of strategic depth, and the inadequate intelligence were significant strategic challenges. The supply shortages, maintenance issues, and limited infrastructure were critical logistical constraints. The outdated ships and armament, the lack of modern technology, and the inadequate training were major technological limitations. Finally, the leadership and command issues, the low morale and discipline, and the cultural and social tensions were key human factors that undermined the effectiveness of the Spanish fleet. The Battle of Manila Bay was a turning point in the history of naval warfare and marked the end of Spanish dominance in the Pacific. The challenges faced by the Spanish fleet in Manila Bay serve as a cautionary tale of the importance of strategic planning, logistical support, technological advancement, and effective leadership in naval warfare. The lessons learned from the Spanish fleet's defeat continue to resonate in the study of military history and the evolution of naval strategy. The Battle of Manila Bay and its influence on the broader Spanish-American War. The Spanish-American War, fought in 1898, was a pivotal conflict that marked the emergence of the United States as a global power. Among the many battles that defined this war, the Battle of Manila Bay stands out as a decisive naval engagement that had far-reaching implications for the course of the war and the subsequent geopolitical landscape. This article delves into the intricacies of the Battle of Manila Bay, exploring its strategic significance, the key players involved, and its profound influence on the broader Spanish-American War. Historical context: the Spanish Empire in decline. By the late 19th century, the Spanish Empire, once a dominant global power, was in a state of decline. The empire had lost most of its colonies in the Americas, and its remaining territories, including Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and Guam, were increasingly seen as burdens rather than assets. Spain's inability to effectively govern these colonies, coupled with rising nationalist movements, created a volatile environment that would eventually lead to conflict. The United States on the rise. In contrast, the United States was experiencing rapid industrialization and economic growth. The country was expanding its influence beyond its borders, driven by a sense of manifest destiny and a desire to establish itself as a global power. The U.S. had long been interested in acquiring overseas territories, particularly in the Caribbean and the Pacific, to secure trade routes and establish naval bases. The Cuban crisis. The immediate catalyst for the Spanish-American War was the situation in Cuba. The island had been a Spanish colony for centuries, but by the 1890s, Cuban nationalists were waging a fierce war of independence against Spanish rule. The conflict was marked by brutal repression, including the use of concentration camps by the Spanish authorities, which led to widespread suffering and death among the Cuban population. The U.S. public, fueled by sensationalist journalism, often referred to as yellow journalism, became increasingly sympathetic to the Cuban cause. The explosion of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor on February 15, 1898, which killed 266 American sailors, further inflamed public opinion. Although the cause of the explosion remains disputed, it was widely blamed on Spain, leading to calls for war. The Philippines, a strategic prize. While Cuba was the immediate focus of U.S. attention, the Philippines also held significant strategic importance. The archipelago, located in the western Pacific, was a key Spanish colony and a vital link in the global trade network. Control of the Philippines would allow the U.S. to project power in the Pacific and gain access to lucrative Asian markets. The Battle of Manila Bay, a decisive naval engagement prelude to the battle in April 1898, as tensions between the U.S. and Spain escalated, President William McKinley ordered the U.S. Asiatic Squadron, commanded by Commodore George Dewey, to sail to the Philippines. Dewey's mission was to engage and destroy the Spanish fleet in Manila Bay, thereby neutralizing Spanish naval power in the region and paving the way for U.S. control of the Philippines. Dewey's squadron consisted of 9 modern warships, including the flagship USS Olympia, as well as several support vessels. The Spanish fleet, under the command of Admiral Patricio Montojo y Pazarin, was significantly weaker, with outdated ships and poorly trained crews. Montojo was aware of the disparity in strength and chose to anchor his fleet in Manila Bay, where he hoped to receive support from shore-based defenses. The battle. On the morning of May 1, 1898, Dewey's squadron entered Manila Bay and engaged the Spanish fleet. The battle began at around 5:40 a.m., with Dewey famously instructing his captain, "You may fire when you are ready, Gridley." The U.S. ships, armed with modern, rapid-fire guns, quickly gained the upper hand. The Spanish fleet, hampered by outdated equipment and poor coordination, was unable to mount an effective defense. By noon, the entire Spanish fleet had been destroyed or captured, with minimal casualties on the American side. The U.S. suffered only 9 wounded, while the Spanish lost 77 men and had over 200 wounded. Aftermath of the battle. The victory at Manila Bay was a stunning success for the United States. It marked the first major engagement of the Spanish-American War and demonstrated the growing power of the U.S. Navy. The destruction of the Spanish fleet effectively ended Spanish naval power in the Pacific and opened the door for U.S. control of the Philippines. However, the battle also raised complex questions about the future of the Philippines. While the U.S. had initially framed its intervention as a humanitarian effort to support Cuban independence, the capture of the Philippines revealed a more imperialistic agenda. The U.S. now faced the challenge of governing a distant colony with a population that had its own aspirations for independence, influence on the broader Spanish-American War. Strategic implications. The Battle of Manila Bay had profound strategic implications for the broader Spanish-American War. By neutralizing Spanish naval power in the Pacific, the U.S. was able to focus its efforts on the Caribbean, where the war's main theater of operations was located. The victory also demonstrated the effectiveness of the U.S. Navy, which played a crucial role in subsequent engagements, including the blockade of Cuba and the invasion of Puerto Rico. Psychological impact. The decisive nature of the victory at Manila Bay had a significant psychological impact on both sides. For the U.S., it bolstered confidence in the nation's military capabilities and reinforced the belief in its manifest destiny to expand its influence globally. For Spain, the loss of its fleet in Manila Bay was a devastating blow that further undermined its ability to wage war and defend its remaining colonies. Diplomatic ramifications. The Battle of Manila Bay also had important diplomatic ramifications. The U.S. victory in the Philippines shifted the balance of power in the Pacific and signaled to other global powers, particularly Japan and Germany, that the U.S. was a force to be reckoned with. This shift in power dynamics would have long-term consequences for international relations in the region. The Philippine question. The capture of the Philippines raised complex questions about the U.S.'s role in the world. While the U.S. had initially framed its intervention in Cuba as a humanitarian effort, the annexation of the Philippines revealed a more imperialistic agenda. This shift in policy sparked a heated debate within the U.S. about the morality and practicality of acquiring overseas colonies. The U.S. ultimately decided to annex the Philippines, leading to the Philippine-American War, 1899–1902, a brutal conflict that resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Filipinos. The decision to annex the Philippines also had long-term consequences for U.S. foreign policy, setting a precedent for future interventions and the establishment of overseas military bases. The Treaty of Paris. The Battle of Manila Bay played a crucial role in shaping the outcome of the Spanish-American War and the subsequent Treaty of Paris, which was signed on December 10, 1898. Under the terms of the treaty, Spain ceded Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines to the United States, and Cuba was granted nominal independence, though it remained under U.S. influence. The acquisition of these territories marked the beginning of the U.S. as a colonial power and had far-reaching implications for its role in global affairs. The U.S. now had a presence in both the Caribbean and the Pacific, allowing it to project power and influence in both regions. The rise of American imperialism. The Battle of Manila Bay and the subsequent annexation of the Philippines marked a turning point in U.S. foreign policy. The U.S. had traditionally adhered to a policy of isolationism, but the victory in Manila Bay and the acquisition of overseas territories signaled a shift towards imperialism. This new approach to foreign policy was driven by a combination of economic interests, strategic considerations, and a belief in the superiority of American values. The rise of American imperialism had profound implications for the U.S. and the world. It led to increased involvement in global affairs, the establishment of military bases overseas, and a more assertive foreign policy. It also sparked a debate within the U.S. about the morality and practicality of imperialism, a debate that continues to this day. The legacy of the Battle of Manila Bay. The Battle of Manila Bay left a lasting legacy that extended far beyond the Spanish-American War. It marked the emergence of the U.S. as a global naval power and set the stage for its involvement in World War I and World War II. The victory also had a profound impact on the Philippines, shaping its history and its relationship with the U.S. in the Philippines. The battle is remembered as a pivotal moment in the country's struggle for independence. While the U.S. initially promised to support Philippine independence, the annexation of the archipelago led to a protracted and bloody conflict. The Philippine-American War, which followed the Spanish-American War, resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Filipinos and left a legacy of resentment towards the U.S. Despite this, the U.S. and the Philippines eventually developed a close relationship, particularly during World War II, when the two countries fought side by side against Japan. Today, the Philippines remains a key ally of the U.S. in the Asia-Pacific region, and the legacy of the Battle of Manila Bay continues to shape the relationship between the two nations. The Battle of Manila Bay was a pivotal event in the Spanish-American War and had far-reaching implications for the course of the conflict and the subsequent geopolitical landscape. The decisive U.S. victory demonstrated the growing power of the U.S. Navy and marked the emergence of the U.S. as a global power. The capture of the Philippines raised complex questions about the U.S.'s role in the world and set the stage for the rise of American imperialism. The battle also had a profound impact on the Philippines, shaping its history and its relationship with the U.S. While the U.S. initially framed its intervention as a humanitarian effort, the annexation of the Philippines revealed a more imperialistic agenda, leading to a protracted and bloody conflict. Despite this, the U.S. and the Philippines eventually developed a close relationship, and the legacy of the Battle of Manila Bay continues to shape the relationship between the two nations. In conclusion, the Battle of Manila Bay was a defining moment in the Spanish-American War and had a lasting impact on the U.S., the Philippines, and the broader world. It marked the beginning of the U.S. as a global power and set the stage for its involvement in global affairs in the 20th century and beyond. The long-term effects of the Battle of Manila Bay on Philippine history. The Battle of Manila Bay, fought on May 1, 1898, was a pivotal event in the history of the Philippines, marking the beginning of the end of Spanish colonial rule and the dawn of American influence in the archipelago. This naval engagement, which saw the United States Navy's Asiatic Squadron, under the command of Commodore George Dewey, decisively defeat the Spanish Pacific Fleet, had profound and far-reaching consequences for the Philippines. The battle not only altered the geopolitical landscape of Southeast Asia but also set in motion a series of events that would shape the course of Philippine history for decades to come. This article explores the long-term effects of the Battle of Manila Bay on Philippine history, examining its impact on the country's political, social, economic, and cultural development. By analyzing the aftermath of the battle, the subsequent American colonization, the Philippine-American War, and the eventual path to independence, we can gain a deeper understanding of how this single event influenced the trajectory of the Philippine nation. The prelude to the Battle of Manila Bay. To fully appreciate the significance of the Battle of Manila Bay, it is essential to understand the context in which it occurred. The late 19th century was a period of intense imperial competition, with European powers and the United States vying for control over territories in Asia, Africa, and the Pacific. The Philippines, a Spanish colony since the 16th century, was a strategic prize due to its location in the heart of Southeast Asia and its potential as a gateway to the vast markets of China and the East Indies. By the 1890s, Spanish rule in the Philippines was increasingly tenuous. The colonial administration was plagued by corruption, inefficiency, and a lack of support from Madrid. The Filipino people, long subjected to oppressive colonial policies, were growing restless, and nationalist sentiments were on the rise. The propaganda movement, led by Filipino intellectuals such as José Rizal, Marcelo del Pilar, and Graciano López Gina, sought to reform Spanish colonial rule and secure greater rights for Filipinos. However, their efforts were met with repression, and by the mid-1890s, the more radical Katipunan, led by Andrés Bonifacio, had emerged, advocating for complete independence through armed revolution. The outbreak of the Philippine Revolution in 1896 marked the beginning of a protracted struggle against Spanish rule. Although the revolutionaries achieved some early successes, they were unable to secure a decisive victory, and by 1897, the Spanish had regained control of much of the archipelago. However, the revolution had exposed the fragility of Spanish colonial rule and set the stage for the events of 1898. Meanwhile, in the United States, the idea of overseas expansion was gaining traction. Influenced by the doctrine of manifest destiny and the belief in the superiority of American civilization, many Americans saw the acquisition of overseas territories as a natural extension of the nation's growth. The sinking of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor in February 1898 provided the pretext for the United States to intervene in the Cuban War of Independence, and by April, the two nations were at war. The Spanish-American War quickly expanded beyond Cuba, as the United States sought to exploit Spain's vulnerabilities in other parts of the world. The Philippines, with its strategic location and potential as a coaling station for the U.S. Navy, became a key target. Commodore George Dewey was ordered to sail to the Philippines and engage the Spanish fleet, setting the stage for the Battle of Manila Bay. The Battle of Manila Bay, a decisive victory on the morning of May 1, 1898, Commodore Dewey's squadron entered Manila Bay and engaged the Spanish fleet under the command of Admiral Patricio Montojo. The battle was a one-sided affair, with the superior firepower and training of the American forces quickly overwhelming the Spanish. By midday, the Spanish fleet had been destroyed, and Dewey had secured control of the bay. The victory at Manila Bay was a turning point in the Spanish-American War and marked the beginning of the end of Spanish colonial rule in the Philippines. However, it also marked the beginning of a new chapter in Philippine history, as the United States, rather than Spain, would emerge as the dominant power in the archipelago. The immediate aftermath, American occupation and the Philippine-American War. Following the Battle of Manila Bay, the United States moved quickly to consolidate its control over the Philippines. In August 1898, American forces occupied Manila, and in December, the Treaty of Paris was signed, formally ending the Spanish-American War and ceding the Philippines, along with Puerto Rico and Guam, to the United States. The transfer of sovereignty from Spain to the United States was met with mixed reactions in the Philippines. While some Filipinos welcomed the Americans as liberators, others viewed them as new colonial masters. The revolutionary government, led by Emilio Aguinaldo, had declared independence from Spain in June 1898 and established the First Philippine Republic. However, the United States refused to recognize the new government, and tensions between the two sides quickly escalated. In February 1899, the Philippine-American War broke out, marking the beginning of a brutal and protracted conflict. The war, which lasted until 1902, was characterized by guerrilla warfare, atrocities on both sides, and a heavy toll on the civilian population. The United States ultimately prevailed, but the war left deep scars on the Philippine psyche and set the stage for decades of American colonial rule. The American colonial period, political and social transformations. The American colonial period, which lasted from 1898 to 1946, brought significant changes to the Philippines. The United States introduced a new system of government, based on democratic principles, and implemented a series of reforms aimed at modernizing the country. However, these changes were often implemented in a way that served American interests, and the Philippines remained a colony, albeit one with a greater degree of autonomy than under Spanish rule. One of the most significant changes during the American period was the introduction of a public education system. The Americans believed that education was the key to civilizing the Filipino people and preparing them for self-government. English was made the medium of instruction, and a network of public schools was established throughout the archipelago. While this policy helped to increase literacy rates and spread democratic ideals, it also had the effect of marginalizing local languages and cultures. The American period also saw the introduction of new political institutions, including a bicameral legislature, a system of local government, and a judiciary. However, these institutions were often dominated by the Filipino elite, who had collaborated with the Americans during the colonial period. This elite, known as the Ilustrados, played a key role in shaping the political landscape of the Philippines, and their influence would continue long after independence. Economic changes and the rise of the plantation economy. The American colonial period also brought significant economic changes to the Philippines. The United States sought to integrate the Philippines into the global economy, and to this end, implemented a series of policies aimed at promoting export-oriented agriculture. The Philippines became a major producer of cash crops such as sugar, tobacco, and abaca, which were exported to the United States and other markets. The rise of the plantation economy had a profound impact on Philippine society. Large tracts of land were consolidated into plantations, often owned by American or Filipino elites, and worked by tenant farmers or laborers. This led to the displacement of many small farmers and the concentration of land ownership in the hands of a few. The plantation economy also reinforced the social hierarchy, with the elite class benefiting from the export trade, while the majority of Filipinos remained impoverished. The American period also saw the development of infrastructure, including roads, railways, and ports, which facilitated the movement of goods and people. However, these developments were often geared towards the needs of the export economy, rather than the broader development of the country. The road to independence, the Commonwealth period. The American colonial period was not without its challenges, and by the 1930s, there was growing pressure for Philippine independence. The Tydings-McDuffie Act of 1934 provided for the establishment of the Commonwealth of the Philippines, a transitional government that would prepare the country for full independence after a 10-year period. The Commonwealth period, which lasted from 1935 to 1946, was marked by significant political and social developments. The Philippines adopted a new constitution, which established a presidential system of government and guaranteed a range of civil liberties. The Commonwealth government, led by President Manuel L. Quezon, implemented a series of reforms aimed at addressing the country's social and economic problems, including land reform and the promotion of industrialization. However, the Commonwealth period was also marked by challenges, including the rise of political factions, the persistence of social inequality, and the threat of Japanese expansion in Asia. The outbreak of World War II in 1941 would bring these challenges to the forefront, as the Philippines became a battleground in the Pacific Theater. World War II and the Japanese occupation. The Japanese invasion of the Philippines in December 1941 marked a dark chapter in Philippine history. The Commonwealth government, led by President Manuel L. Quezon, fled to the United States, and the Philippines was placed under Japanese military occupation. The occupation was marked by widespread atrocities, including the Bataan Death March, in which thousands of Filipino and American prisoners of war died. The Japanese occupation also had a profound impact on Philippine society. The Japanese sought to exploit the Philippines' resources for their war effort, and implemented a series of policies aimed at suppressing resistance and promoting collaboration. However, the occupation also gave rise to a strong resistance movement, led by guerrilla groups such as the Hekbalahap, which fought against the Japanese and their collaborators. The liberation of the Philippines by American forces in 1944-45 marked the end of the Japanese occupation, but the country was left devastated by the war. The capital, Manila, was largely destroyed, and the economy was in shambles. The war also left deep scars on the Philippine psyche, and the experience of occupation and liberation would shape the country's post-war development. Post-war reconstruction and the path to independence. The end of World War II brought new challenges and opportunities for the Philippines. The country was granted independence on July 4, 1946, marking the end of nearly half a century of American colonial rule. However, the newly independent Philippines faced a host of problems, including the need for post-war reconstruction, the challenge of nation-building, and the legacy of colonialism. The post-war period was marked by significant political and social changes. The Philippines adopted a new constitution, which established a democratic system of government and guaranteed a range of civil liberties. However, the country's political system was dominated by the elite, who had collaborated with the Americans during the colonial period. This elite, known as the oligarchy, played a key role in shaping the political landscape of the Philippines, and their influence would continue long after independence. The post-war period also saw the rise of new social movements, including the Hekbalahap, which had fought against the Japanese during the war. The Hekbalahap, which later became the Hakbang Mapagpalaya ng Bayan (HMB), sought to address the social and economic inequalities that had persisted since the colonial period. However, the Huk Rebellion was ultimately suppressed by the Philippine government, with the support of the United States. The Cold War and the Philippines. The Cold War had a significant impact on the Philippines, as the country became a key ally of the United States in the struggle against communism. The Philippines was a founding member of the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, SEATO, and played a key role in the U.S. strategy of containment in Asia. The country also served as a base for American military operations during the Korean War and the Vietnam War. The Cold War also had a profound impact on Philippine domestic politics. The threat of communism was used to justify the suppression of leftist movements and the imposition of martial law by President Ferdinand Marcos in 1972. Marcos, who ruled the Philippines as a dictator until 1986, implemented a series of policies aimed at promoting economic development and maintaining political stability. However, his regime was also marked by widespread human rights abuses, corruption, and the concentration of power in the hands of a few. The People Power Revolution and the restoration of democracy. The People Power Revolution of 1986 marked a turning point in Philippine history. The revolution, which was sparked by widespread discontent with the Marcos regime, led to the ouster of Marcos and the restoration of democracy. The new government, led by President Corazon Aquino, implemented a series of reforms aimed at addressing the country's social and economic problems, including land reform and the promotion of human rights. However, the post-Marcos period was also marked by challenges, including political instability, economic difficulties, and the persistence of social inequality. The Philippines also faced new challenges in the post-Cold War era, including the rise of Islamic militancy in the southern Philippines and the impact of globalization on the country's economy. The legacy of the Battle of Manila Bay. The Battle of Manila Bay had a profound and lasting impact on Philippine history. The battle marked the beginning of the end of Spanish colonial rule and the dawn of American influence in the Philippines. The subsequent American colonial period brought significant changes to the country, including the introduction of a new system of government, the development of a public education system, and the rise of the plantation economy. However, the American period also reinforced social inequalities and left a legacy of political and economic dependency. The road to independence was marked by challenges, including the Philippine-American War, the Japanese occupation during World War II, and the struggle for nation-building in the post-war period. The Cold War further complicated the country's development, as the Philippines became a key ally of the United States in the struggle against communism. The People Power Revolution of 1986 marked a new chapter in Philippine history, as the country sought to address the legacy of colonialism and dictatorship. However, the challenges of nation-building, social inequality, and political instability continue to shape the Philippines today. In conclusion, the Battle of Manila Bay was a pivotal event in Philippine history, setting in motion a series of events that would shape the course of the nation for decades to come. The battle marked the beginning of a new era in the Philippines, one that was marked by both progress and challenges, and whose legacy continues to be felt to this day.